Grand Prix season. 71 laps around this circuit. And John, it's going to be a very interesting race, because not only what's going to happen on fuel stops and tire stops, but what is going to happen with the weather.
Well, we have got the mayor of Sao Paulo explaining to us what a lovely country we have here in Brazil, and what beautiful weather in Brazil also. And directly above us, as opposed to, well, there you see there in the background the grey clouds that again are gathering over Interlagos. And in fact, wet weather has been forecast for, not just for the Grand Prix, in fact for the whole day. That hasn't been the case so far, but the weather, unfortunately, I'm sure is going to play another major role in the outcome of a Brazilian Grand Prix.
On the grid, 26 cars, 26 drivers, and a lot of very nervous mechanics, John. When I was walking down the pits earlier on, and most of the mechanics, maybe it's because it's the first race, maybe because of a lot of unknown quantities, but a lot of people are, let's say, nervous.
Well, I believe there's a lot for them to be, I think apprehensive is probably what they're feeling more than just nervousness. But we've got a new start to a Grand Prix season. There are a number of new people, of course, joining teams, and for them this is the first time in rail. The main concern obviously is going to be with the strategy, and every team has kept very close to its own chest what they are in fact going to do. And I would not be surprised to see very shortly after the start of a race somebody taking the chance on a very short first run. It's generally considered to be a 3-stop Grand Prix, and that's part of the reason why there's apprehension.
The front row of the grid, his 63rd pole position, Ayrton Senna, with Michael Schumacher equaling his best qualifying performance. The second row of the grid, John Alesi and Damon Hill, then Heinz-Harald Frentzen and Gianni Morbidelli. So that's an interesting top 6. Carl Wendlinger and Mika Häkkinen, 7th and 8th. And then Jos Verstappen, his first Grand Prix in the Benetton Ford, alongside Ukio Katayama, Christian Fittipaldi and Mark Blundell. On the next row, then it is Eric Gomez and Rubens Barrichello. Behind those two, we find Pierluigi Martini and Eddie Irvine. Gerhard Berger, a disappointing qualifying session on Friday and Saturday, but this morning went a little better, alongside Martin Brundle. Then it's Elige Rowe of Oliver Panis and Eric Bernard, and they're followed by Johnny Herbert and Michele Alboreto, who was disappointed that it started to rain yesterday because he thought he could have been higher up the grid. The last row, Bertrand Gachot and Gary Brabham, making it 1 car apiece for the new Pacific and Simtech teams here in Brazil.
Well, just to reinforce Michele Alboreto's views about Saturday qualifying, he in fact was 3rd quickest this morning in his Minardi Ford, and he's looking forward to obviously a Grand Prix where experience, and that's what certainly Michele Alboreto has plenty of, will play its part. Equally happy where the Footwork Ford team with Gianni Morbidelli and Christian Fittipaldi. And I talked to Alan Jenkins, the designer of this footwork car, and he said, isn't it wonderful to have 2 young drivers in a team who are both quick? So the pleasure in the team, obvious for all to see.
Well, John, and also Mark Blundell, a very happy man. He was 4th fastest during the morning warm-up, and he said, well, we actually fixed the problem. We were quick here on Friday morning, and we found the rear diffuser having a couple of problems. Some things broke off it, and they didn't see it, or they didn't notice it anyway. But Mark says, we found the problem, and I'm looking for a very good race. The only problem for Mark, as for Michele, is that they're quite a long way back on the grid.
Well, a couple of people this morning felt that Tyrrell's have a very good chance of certainly getting into the points. 2 cars that have been quick, they've proved fairly reliable throughout the 2 days of practice and qualifying. And of course, the kind of strategy one might expect from the Tyrrell team could be different from that of the majority of others.
The cars off the grid, all 26 cars have started. I can't see anyone that stopped from the dummy grid, and now it's a warm-up lap, and then we stop on the grid proper, and then it's 71 laps. Last year's winner, of course, Ayrton Senna on pole position. Damon Hill then finished 2nd, Schumacher 3rd, Johnny Herbert 4th, Mark Blundell 5th, and Alessandro Zanardi in 6th position. Well, last year's race, we all remember, it started to rain very heavily indeed.
Well, rain is always a problem here, but there's another problem. Look at the amount of paper that's being allowed to blow onto the track. This is coming from the spectator areas. Traditionally, paper gets onto the circuit here at an early stage in the race, and of course that gets into the radiator boxes that support and hold the radiators themselves. Overheating is a major worry for some of the teams. Maybe possible during pit stops for one of the team members to put his hand into those boxes, drag out any debris, rubber, paper, something teams are going to think about.
And then I think we're going to have a guess, John, who's going to be the first man to make a pit stop. Well, I know fairly sure that the Sauber team is planning on a one-stop race, and so is the Lotus team.
Sauber, I think, are doing it because they only have one refueling rig, in fact, so it would be difficult for them to do more than one per car. My bet is that either a Ferrari or a Benetton Ford, possibly Mika Häkkinen in the McLaren Peugeot, those are my three nominees, let's say, for a stop somewhere between lap 12 and 15, whereas the average are probably going to go through to somewhere around lap 20 to 25. An early stop may well give people an advantage. It may well be the way to win the race. But of course, the one factor that nobody's going to be able to control, and that is the weather.
The cars lining up on the grid, and then for the first time, and we're going to have 15 times to follow, there'll be a green flag, a 5-second board, and then the lights we can see in the middle of our screen will change from red to green.
Well, a very tense moment indeed, and Ayrton Senna's got his mirrors full of a red Ferrari of Jean Alesi, and that's a somewhat daunting prospect because to his left he's got Michael Schumacher, and these two men are known for their lack of consideration, let's say, into first corners. They're not going to show any respect to Senna whatsoever, and it's crucial for pole position man to secure his position into that first corner. Otherwise, you'll be swamped, and well, as we saw last year, very easily out of the race.
All 26 cars are stationary. In the back of our screen, we see the green flag. The 5-second board just on the right is up. First gear is engaged. Revs are up. The red light is on, and it's all go. And a very good start from Gerhard Berger. A very good start and a very bad one from Michael Schumacher. Ayrton Senna leads Jean Alesi. Then it's Schumacher and Damon Hill. That is the situation. And look at Carl Wendlinger and Heinz-Harald Frentzen. They're fighting over 5th position. But Ayrton Senna leads Jean Alesi, and I think that's what he wanted. Everybody safely round the first corner, but what a start. And what a start from Berger, look at it.
Tremendous start from Gerhard Berger all the way back, and he came out of the box like a greyhound, and well, he's used his experience and the power of the Ferrari. Now also that may just be due to the fact that Ferrari have chosen to put Berger on a light fuel load rather than Jean Alesi. That kind of performance on an opening lap is not normal. That indicates to me something is slightly different on Berger's Ferrari.
Well, Gerhard Berger had a blinding start last year, remember, but then didn't really make it around the first corner when he had a indiscretion with Michael Andretti. But Jean Alesi will do everything he knows to hold up Michael Schumacher, and Schumacher going around the inside, and Alesi is retaking that. Oh, that's proper motor racing there.
Well, this is going to be real motor racing because as they come up to the end of the pit straight, watch for Schumacher trying to slide underneath Jean Alesi, but he will be ready for him, and he isn't close enough.
Ayrton Senna leads Jean Alesi at the end of lap 1. Then it is Michael Schumacher in 3rd position. Damon Hill, Heinz-Harald Frentzen in 5th. Mika Häkkinen, Carl Wendlinger, and that is the situation. But what a first lap it was.
And Schumacher very, very eager indeed to get Jean Alesi behind him, because he knows the longer he's behind Alesi, the longer, well, the greater the contact to Ayrton Senna is going to be. But again, up the hill, the Ferrari power of that car pulled it away from the Benetton Ford. In the meantime, Senna has got a clear track ahead of him. He's able to drive at his own pace. and pace it is what he will be doing.
And behind that we saw Heinz-Harald Frentzen fighting with Mika Häkkinen over 5th place. But that is the fight we're going to watch. And look at Senna opening up a gap. And again, Michael Schumacher goes to the inside. And now he's got it covered. He's got 2nd place from Jean Alesi.
And in reality, there wasn't an awful lot of resistance from Alesi in that situation. But again, the speed of the Ferrari in the straight. Look, now that is not just horsepower. Oh, and Schumacher chopped the nose off Alesi's Ferrari. Absolutely without any mercy whatsoever.
Jean, undoubtedly not being a very happy Frenchman.
Well, Alan, all I can say is, what's the difference between a rock and a hard place? You saw it there. Michael Schumacher was as hard as I've seen any driver in a Grand Prix since Senna and Prost at the British Grand Prix last year.
The man that has not made a blinding first lap is Mark Blundell in 14th place, and Martin Brundle is currently behind him, or he was anyway, in 16th position. And Gerhard Berger is up to 8th place, just in front of Jos Verstappen, and carrying on his good performance in those early laps. So Senna, Schumacher, but the gap between those two is already 4 seconds.
The question, I think, is what strategy have the Williams-Renault team adopted? Senna's pulling away with a lot more ease than one would have expected from the relative performances of the Benetton and the Williams over 2 days of practice and qualifying. I expressed a view about what I thought Benetton might do. I didn't think that Williams would go for, let's say, a radical structure, a radical race setup. But Senna comfortably now over 4 seconds in the lead from Schumacher, who's pulled out a further 4 seconds from Jean Alesi, who's got a couple of seconds advantage on Damon Hill.
First retirement of the race is Bertrand Gachot, who stopped somewhere on the circuit with the Pacific Grand Prix, the Omer engine, so a very short debut for that team. John, the one that's sitting there fairly comfortable is Damon Hill, who's now got Mika Häkkinen right behind him, who's gone past Heinz-Harald Frentzen, and behind those two is a queue of drivers with Wendlinger, Berger, Verstappen, Barrichello, and Gianni Morbidelli.
Well, I wouldn't say Damon's exactly comfortable. I think he would like to be ahead of Alesi and certainly ahead of Schumacher, and the pressure he's got from behind with Häkkinen, Frentzen, Wendlinger, and Berger isn't going to make his life comfortable.
Ayrton Senna completes lap 4 out of 71. And we're on board. You can see the speed on the right of your screen. And Michael Schumacher is actually closing the gap a little bit. He's half a second on this lap. The gap now 3.8 seconds between leader Ayrton Senna. We're riding with him in the Williams-Renault, and Michael Schumacher in 2nd place. Those two in a class of their own. Next man is Jean Alesi back in the 120s, and then it's Damon Hill, the first driver, in the 121s. Now, John, could that be, for instance, that Ayrton might plan 2 stops and Damon might plan 1?
I would imagine that they're going to go for that type of strategy. I think it would be 3 stops and 2 stops rather than 2 and 1. I think that most of the front-running teams have worked out that the problem in the race is not going to be fuel, it's going to be how you use your tyres. And Schumacher's had to use his tyres very hard indeed in the early opening laps to get past Jean Alesi. He's now pushing extremely hard to close that gap on Ayrton Senna. So it's going to be tyre performance, but people really don't know